All right, it's chicken time. That's a stat spread. That's a tier list. Where do we fit in the chicken inside that? Well, let's find out.
Let the lesson begin.
What's up, guys? Akariss here, bringing you another Fire Emblem Heroes video. Today's video is going to talk about Legendary Fae, whether you should be pulling on the banner, and her full analysis, plus a review of the Earth Legendaries that I did rank, I believe, back in August. So there will be a clickable for that above me, so you can go review what I think about Earth Legendaries. It's pretty much the same. Nothing's really changed since then. However, we do have Fae added to the list, and of course Tiki is getting refined soon, very, very soon, so those definitely will factor into what I think about the Earth Legendaries overall. This video is going to focus, of course, on whether it's worth your time to even consider this banner. Hopefully you haven't pulled already, and if you have, then obviously this video probably wasn't going to change your mind if you did quickly pull that fast, because you probably knew what you were doing. Those of you on the fence, though, hopefully this might enlighten you and help you save for something possibly more important. As I mentioned in yesterday's impressions video, Fae's banner and just legendary and mythic banners in general have come to a point where there's so much mixing and matching of legendaries and mythics and sometimes fodder that it is mostly dependent on a case-by-case basis on whether you should be pulling. Even new players, I heavily recommend saving literally thousands of orbs. You can see I'm getting up there myself because I'm saving for Linja and Legendary Corrin, which is on the next banner. So my scenario is specific to me, and everyone should try to kind of match that, because that's the best way that you can succeed through gacha. If you do basically swipe and buy orbs, then it doesn't really matter as much, although at that point you're probably wasting money. But if you are F2P and you're trying to make best use of those resources given to you, then you should have some sort of goal in mind. I've mentioned this through basically most of my videos. If you have something you're playing for, it's much easier to keep yourself to set goal rather than throwing random orbs at random banners that have legendary chickens on them and likely not much value out of it. Even as a new player, this is still crucial because we are time gated on all resources. Okay, so this banner itself, I did give my impressions, but generally speaking, that hasn't changed. Fae's stat spread doesn't really help her use case, and if the two colors that I was going to recommend on this banner for value, so to speak, for most people, it likely would land in blue or possibly green. Green having Triandra and Hell with two pretty solid dark mythics-ish, and Scarlet having some good fodder, whereas blue has, of course, the new distant counter, Fae Polar, which is okay as a one-off. I'll review light mythics in time, and Niffle, who's again pretty solid as a one-off, at least to have. So those are all pretty solid things, which does tie into my next point here, which is whether it's actually worth your orbs. When considering legendary mythic banners, the mathematics behind it is that you should pretty much only target a specific color if you're okay with everything sharing. And that's just because it's harder to target specific characters on legendaries and mythic banners because the focus rate is divided among all of the candidates. So in the case here, let's say you wanted Uller, Fae, or Niffle, and I'm just saying specifically one of them. This is the odds behind it. And it gets pretty bad. Obviously, if you're like, let's say 1 in 100 people, you would spend 884 orbs just strictly trying to get like Fae, for example. That has happened to me. I'm speaking from experience. Most people eventually have that outcome if you've been playing long enough. So it's very important that you are okay with everything on legendary and mythic banner. If, for example, you don't like, this is a different scenario here. If you're okay with any of the three sharing, then you'll see that just getting 5 stars in that particular color are pretty good. Like, it's pretty good odds. You will get a lot of 5 stars, and because it can only be one of those three, then you will rack up a lot of merges or fodder respectively. This is how I approach legendary mythic banners. It's something that I will continue to push. Make sure you're okay with what's sharing together, because you're going to get a lot of them before committing to these banners. Take that for like any future banner, mythic or legendary specifically, of course. It's a shame there's no like remix or anything like that. Spark value where you can guarantee something, but it's just not the case with these type of banners, and maybe one day that will be the case. I sincerely hope so. anyways, guys, I'm gonna jump into first what I think about Fae, and with that, we also will go into the tier list and where I feel the Earth Legendaries rank after I cover her. So, with Fae herself, unfortunately, her speed stat isn't extremely high. Yeah, unfortunately, her speed stat isn't as high as it probably could have been. I was hoping they would actually dump the attack stat more and give her more speed, but unfortunately 28 is what we ended up with, and well, as we'll see, her builds might end up being a little bit awkward because of that speed stat. Now, 28 speed isn't like a doom sentence because, as we all are familiar with, Legendary Chrom basically pumps up a pretty mediocre speed stat into something pretty terrifying, and he kills people. But Fae is not a ranged infantry armor slaying null penalty type of guy, so unfortunately for her, she is going to have some issues, and that is where we're going to talk about here. So if you don't remember her weapon, it has a guard effect. It -5 to all enemy stats, pretty easy condition to meet. It has that standard adaptive damage. It gives her extra attack, which is all pretty good. Her special is basically just Miracle, but the first proc of it is a full heal, and it is pre-charged. So it's not bad, it's pretty good, and you'll find some use case out of it, like almost all the time, but it's gonna hinder some of her damage potential, which you can rely on specials and compare it to everyone else. And again, considering her season being full of like null follow-up and dragon effectiveness, it puts her in a pretty awkward position, which is definitely we're going to talk about in a moment. If you don't remember what her fodder is, it's basically the upgraded distant counter, distant stance, with no drawback, just extra 5 res. That's pretty good. Dragon's Ire, which is like the dragon null follow-up. The difference, of course, is that you get an auto follow-up on Dragon's Ire, and it has a 50% HP condition. I'm not convinced that's ideal if you're an infantry dragon, but it's there. And finally, Defense Res Menace, which lowers enemy defense and res and buffs herself. Not bad for a base kit. Pretty good fodder for sure, since it brings something new on the table, but her stat spread is going to be a bit awkward to make function considering what her roles are. And with that being said, let's actually just take a look at some of the builds that we've got in place here. So with Fae, I feel like her best way of using her is honestly just speed stacking. So null follow-up with speed stacking is a great way to do it. Just keep her special because that's unique to her and honestly pretty decent in something like Ether Raids, because it doesn't really matter what the opponent's going to have. You have yourself a second life or a second chance, and you can rely on her pretty monstrous attack stat to secure kills. If you stack her speed enough and run null follow-up, she'll have a pretty decent matchup spread across the board. Remember, none of this is with like Mythic Blessings, or attack stat does get pretty high up there. I'm talking into like 80s without even really having to super buff it. Her speed needs work, so you definitely need to work on that with Joint Drive, attack speed solo, and all of that. Remember, her weapon does help her a bit in the speed department as well, and in Ether Raids, she will make a decent tank option just because there's a bunch of wind sweeps and that kind of stuff running around. If you run the null follow-up build, it could be advantageous to also run like Flame for damage reduction, but Corrin is probably okay in most cases, just stacking enough bulk and getting your kills off of her really good attack stat. The other variants that I do like as well are Dragon Wall, because she just naturally has a very high res stat, so it does work with her. Another alternative A skill is Distant Pressure in the speed builds, because then you do have a bit of recoil there, but you got to be careful with that because that can turn off your miracle effect. Or not, like, it's not turning it off, but anti-synergistic rather, and there's no innate natural healing that she has, so something like Sparkling Boost on air really helps with that. Finally, as a gimmick ghetto build, you can consider the Miracle Spam build, which is Special Spiral into Steady Breath. That definitely will require some sort of external healing in some form, Flame, Sparkling Boost, another type of healer, Dual Hilda, something like that, just to like make sure she's healthy after her first proc, but nonetheless, it can potentially work. Either way, I feel like Fae is missing something in every single build, whether it's like some sort of attack or maybe it's not enough bulk. Something is definitely missing when you consider most of these builds, but I'm sure they will function even at a low merge count. Moving on though, I also would consider finally an attack stack type of build where you just bump up her monstrous attack stack as much as possible and just get kills with a special that isn't hers. Something like Glimmer, she hits res, right? Mostly a lower stat for most opponents, or defense if they're range unit, and you're going to get a lot of kills that way. So I feel like a Glimmer build could potentially work, just bumping up her stats as much as possible. For Arena though, you're presented with two scenarios, I feel, if you're going to commit to Fae long term, which is try to beat Claude or try to become unkillable. If you choose to beat Claude, then she may suffer in an aspect of just literally dying many times. Thankfully, she has a special that kind of denies that, but it's still a bit weird because you're pretty much trying to stack as much speed as possible to try to outspeed one of the fastest characters in the game. Mind you, it can be done. It's pretty close. If you use like chill speed, if you run drive speeds, if you stack the speed, it can work and you can outspeed Claude with Fae. But it is difficult, it's not as easy, and you definitely are going to require team support, bumping up your Fae, and enemy basically debuffed as much as possible to get that to work. If you stack speed though, it does give you some decent matchups against quite a few, including Alm, potentially Julia, and such. If you consider how like Tiki functions with either Bold Fighter or Slick Fighter, which we're gonna get, the Dazzling Breath's like denying follow-up effect ends up becoming like a speed check. Like it just becomes a normal kind of speed check. So stacking her speed is pretty good to make sure that you are competitive with Fae. If you run the unkillable build as showcased here, this one is going to have some problems against stuff like no follow-up and just natural dragon effectiveness that you're going to see all over Earth Season. However, because she has more bulk, she's going to be able to just take those hits and hopefully have an easier time. But again, as with all the builds I've shown so far, Fae is in a very awkward position that's just trying to like use stats to win matchups and use this like really gimmick of a special, which by the way is still weak to like brave weapons because it's a post-heal thing. And it doesn't heal more than once, so it's just, it's nice, but I don't feel like Fae is like, oh, boom, oh my god, this is an amazing type of unit, which is okay. We don't need Legendary Sigurd every single time we get a Legendary release, but Fae is going to work for those that use her, not necessarily the, oh my god, most amazing unit to be released. With that being said, though, let's talk about the Legendaries again, review them. I'm not going to go through everything fully like I did last time. I'm just going to go through them and update some small placements here. So starting with the old tier list, as you can see there, this was covered, I believe, in August. I still stand by those placements. Claude is by far the best unit in Earth. Julia is still, in my opinion, like Julia, she's really good. She has really high res stat, really good nuker. Alm is still solid and has access to Deadeye. And then you have the rest with Seliph, Ike, Grima, and Tiki. Now, things have changed though, and where I feel placements have to be updated is below me here. So Claude is still going to be basically dominating Earth Season. If you use Claude, you'll likely have an easier time than most who have Earth Legendaries. I've decided to reserve Tiki's placement by just putting her as a question mark. She's not an S, it's just I don't know where she stands until I see her weapon refine, and I'll probably just do not a video, well, yeah, probably a video, but also a post to say where I feel she stands after this. But honestly, the other legendaries don't really move much in relevance to Fae's release. Julia, in my opinion, is still a second place to Claude. She, again, has a really good stat spread, really good nuking potential, fits really well into her season. She's just solid. There's no reason. She scores well, too. 180 is still okay. And remember, these tier lists are with Arena in mind, guys. Like, people see this and like, oh my god, Grima's last place. Yeah, she is. She can't use a dual skill. There is no dual skill for her. They didn't update her Arena scoring. If you play Arena competitively, which these legendaries are made in mind, then Grima's an easy last place because unfortunately, you're just not going to be able to be competitive. Claude scores well and is a good unit. If we were to talk more about AR competitiveness, then yeah, I could readjust these for sure. But unfortunately, this is with that Arena mindset. So Fae scores really well. She is competitive with Claude there, but unfortunately, she's in a season where Alm and Claude have no follow-up. Tiki and Julia have dragon effectiveness, and that just makes it rough to use her just out of the box, but she should still be able to win most of those matchups in some way. It's mostly awkward kind of scenarios, but she should be okay. Seliph, Ike, and Grima users have their own problems. While Grima might be able to win matches, you're just not going to be able to rank well because she scores well. Ike fits into like a into a season where there's like 3 other blues, which is unfortunate. And Seliph, again, kind of the same scenario. Being a red and a blue kind of game is not too much fun for them. So they're not terrible, but they're just not great in the season that they are. So Fae stands somewhere in the middle for me. I might update that, but I feel pretty confident about where it stands. Tiki's unknown until I see that weapon, but she seems like she's going to be pretty good. Alright, and finally, in the last portion of this video, we're going to talk about the should you pull or would you pull section that the community has thankfully been involved in. As always, I'd love to present this information to you guys because it is your data at the end of the day. You guys choose these sort of things, and I basically just review it. So comparing the Patreon poll and the YouTube poll, again, they look fairly similar. No big surprises here. I'm actually going to be shocked when I see one that's like, yes, everyone is summoning. So that's going to be interesting. It might be book 6, but I'm glad to see that people are confident in how they want to play the game and aren't uncertain. So for the most part, we are saving orbs for something more important. Starting with Jeff's comment on Patreon, he says, only free summon for me. I started my account at the beginning of last month and pulled hard on the awesome September banner to get Legendary Violet and Legendary Chrom. Legendary banners are too inconsistent to pull with less than 500 orbs, so going to wait a few months before making any more pulls. That is great that you are basically like newish on your account and already have like a goal and mindset on how you want to play it, so it's very respectable, and I hope others can maybe take that perspective and make sure you are playing and saving for something important to you. It doesn't have to be competitive minded, but it does help if you have something in mind when going for these banners. Next up is a comment by A Slider who says, her preference miracle is pretty nice, but having another blue dragon legendary in Earth season is a pretty terrible spot to be in. I'll skip on her since I already have 2 of the other Earth legendaries, Tiki and Julia, which already hit her for super effective damage and could possibly take her out in one combat even with miracle pre-charged. Fae is interesting, but probably only middle of the road for Earth legendaries behind Claude, Alma, and Julia. So yeah, I mostly agree with A Slider here on his comment. Definitely, you don't need another legendary if you already have them built. Even older ones like Tiki are getting better. So for sure. And yeah, I do feel like Julia isn't really affected by Fae's presence. Definitely not if you decide to give her an impact skill, for example, where it's going to make things awkward for Fae to try to kill her back. It might be a stalemate, but generally speaking, Julia is still going to be advantageous as a ranged unit that hits really hard. And Claude being a flying range unit that scores well is even better. So yeah, Alm himself is likely due for a remix pretty soon-ish, so that only kind of makes Fae in a not good place, unfortunately. Next up is a comment by Like Ike who says, green is solid to spend for any one of the focuses, but as a one-off of the focuses, but as others have already noted, I'm baffled by the decision and why Fallen Dimitri isn't on this banner. Guess IS gave up with good ideas between Resplendent Sarah, Bare Bones Update Notif, and not a legendary Fae. So yeah, I guess that's a pretty opinionated point of view. Even targeting like one-offs of a lot of this stuff, I would be more confident just like sparking something like Fallen Dimitri, but I see if you're trying to get like value, hoping that you had like Uller, Legendary Fae, and then like Fallen Dimitri as a share. Although maybe Nifl's even better than that. I don't know how I feel about Fallen Dimitri truly being better than something like that, but I guess he does have Tempest and he is a good one-off. So everyone's scenario is a bit different. I do realize now, though, that Sarah and Fae in Japan share voice actors, so that is probably the correlation there. I'm sure that the voice actor just was able to compile their work for here, and that's why we ended up with this kind of scenario around the same time. Just business as usual, I suppose. Final comment by the other one on YouTube says, no, I'm saving orbs for Plumeria merges in November. I finally started making a little progress on my orb stash, and now is not the time to blow it. I also already have merged Julia for his season. I hope she can take Fae, but if not, I'll change up the other unit skills on my Earth team to take her on. Overall, this banner looks a bit unimpressive. I doubt it'll even go past the free summon. So I like that mentality for sure. I wouldn't really worry too much about the Julia Fae matchup. I feel like it's mostly some like a stalemate for the most part. While Julia may not be able to kill her in one round, it's possible, probably with enough attack and speed. But if you do run something like an Impact or even Fury, you're gonna have so much res between the Preference, Light, and Dark that Fae is gonna do minimal damage back. So as with most dragons, she's not hitting the defense stat on Julia, and that just makes it really comfortable because Julia has a monstrous res stat that she just doesn't really care when a dragon hits her. Wouldn't be too worried about that. For sure, probably someone like Claude has a better matchup, I'm certain, or possibly even Tiki once we see what her weapon does once refined. All in all, guys, that basically covers my coverage on an updated Earth Legendary tier list and ranking, Legendary Fae's banner, what you guys are doing, and where, of course, she stands in this whole mess with her builds and whatnot. I might be reviewing her later if I feel she truly did get better, but I'm a bit doubtful, honestly, because I feel like she's just in an awkward place at an awkward time. And maybe if we had her earlier, she would have been a lot better. Possibly even like before Claude, who knows. Either way, guys, thank you for watching as always. If you love this content, you want to participate in the Patreon comments and give me your point of view or hero reviews, consider the Patreon description below. Best way to support this content and helps convince me to keep chugging it out. Thanks, guys. Smash the like button, sub if you haven't already. I'll see you in the next one.
It's over.